Hey, Sean, thanks for joining us today. As way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, so thanks, Brian. Honored and pleasure to be with you today. I'm a 25 plus year veteran in IT staffing sales.
Well,
We tend to sell to, my group tends to sell to local, regional IT companies here in the Boston area, or any companies that have IT staffing needs, staff augmentation, that sort of thing. I've got a group of 3 or 4 individuals that I manage and mentor, and yeah, like I said, really happy to be on with you.
cool. Why sales, though?
Well,
Long story.
maybe the same answer that most people give you. One of those things where I sort of fell into it.
Yeah.
Graduated college without any sort of practical skills, and fell into recruiting and then into sales, and just kind of continued on. It was somebody early on in my career said, "It's sales is a great way to make doctor money without all the schooling." So
Sure is. Yeah.
for me,
Yeah. And how long did it take before it stuck, before it was like you knew it was the thing you wanted to do?
long time.
19 years.
Well, you might, honest to God, for a long time, I really kind of felt as though I was just a guy
Yeah.
doing sales. And so I'd meet people in social occasions and things like that. And sometimes I'd tell them I was in sales, and sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes it's because I didn't really associate myself as a sales guy. And sometimes when I told people I was a salesperson, they would kind of thank me for the quick conversation and, go find the cheese plate.
Yeah.
I think they were thinking I was going to try and sell them something.
Well, selling services does have kind of a very different feel to it, doesn't
Mhm.
it? Have you
I
ever
agree.
sold a
Yeah,
product?
never have. It's always
Okay.
been, and that's one of the unique things about staffing sales. We're really selling people. So there's sort of a sales job on both sides of the equation. We're selling our clients on our ability to find the right person for them, and we're selling our candidates on the ability to put them in the right spot too. So it's
Cool.
a sort of a dual sell, I guess.
So you learned everything about sales and then you became a leader? Is that how it worked?
Uh, yeah, I guess that's kind of how it worked.
How was that transition?
And so, I learned slow in sales. So I didn't really have what I would consider a great mentor. You learn certain techniques and you learn certain things, and there are certain tenets that we're taught in staffing sales anyway. I don't know how the rest of sales is, but there are definitely tenets that we learn that aren't really all that effective. And we follow them and we say, geez, why am I not getting this right? Why is it that I keep doing these things and I don't seem to be really getting anywhere? And so for a while, it was just real hard for me to grasp that. Things like you talk about, like meet your customer where they are, and put yourself in your customer's shoes. That was something that took me a real long time to really understand, because I was, in a sense, I don't know much about IT. I don't know much about my client's domain. I don't know as much as I'll never know as much as my client knows. But I went through a period where I really tried to understand all of that stuff so that I would be able to put myself in their seat. And then after a while, I realized and figured that I don't really need to meet them there. That's sort of what we uncover rational pain, or what I call rational pain versus emotional pain. And if I can understand what the emotional side of the thing is for them, then I don't really need to know all that other stuff. If I know the ramifications of them not whatever problem they're trying to solve, then that's really all I need to target. And it took me much longer than I think it should have. If I had had a mentor early on in my career who could have helped guide me on that, I think I would have been a lot better off. But for a long time in my career, I was just a sales guy that I did just I did enough to make to go well. I did enough that I was making more money than I'd be doing with any of my other skills, and I made my number often enough to stick around. And then it hadn't really been until the last, I'd say 8 or 9 years that I really started to invest a little bit more in myself. I really started reading a lot more about sales and, take ownership of my career, which is something I should have been doing a long time ago. And something that I preach to my guys now is like, look, man, it's on you to learn this stuff. So, I picked up some books by Jeb Blount and many others, and it led me to you as well. And I find that the stuff that I see on your site is so valuable because it's stuff that was really missing in my career for a long time. And when I did learn it, I just kind of learned it the hard way. And
Yeah.
it's hard to be a sales leader and have everybody learning the hard way, because then you just kind of churn through people. And those guys that aren't making their number go, those guys that are making their number stay. But there's a lot of good people that go that if they had the right mentorship, they'd stay and they'd be really good. And so that's sort of where I am in my career right now. And that's really what I like right now. And I think I probably do that side of my job better than I really do the actual playing, the coaching part. I'm a player coach. I think the coaching part I'm actually better at than the playing part.
Well, there is this thing about coaching where the Solomon's paradox, when you can look at someone else's problem, it's a lot easier to fix than when you look at your own problem.
No doubt about it.
So the coaching, if you played the game long enough, sometimes you know why they're not calling you back. You know why they didn't go with you. You know why all of these things happen.
Right.
But when you're in the game, you're emotionally attached. You're kind of blind to it.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And so I think when we set this call up, I think it was because one of my guys had mentioned that he really improved his numbers, and he really did it. And most of my guys are doing the same thing. And I think that it's a lot of the things are what you talk about on your podcast, Brian. And they tend to be, getting beyond just that which I talked about rational pain, getting beyond that and getting to, okay, I can't remember what sales leader or sales book I got this from, but the whole so what thing. Okay, well, so we're not going to meet our deadline. Well, so what? People do that all the time and they keep their job. Well, if that happens, then this is going to happen. And it's kind of like, oh, well, okay, so what? And then kind of bring them on and down the line to the point where they're now saying, well, you know what? My team is going to mutiny. I'm going to lose half my team. I'm going to go home and my wife is going to hate me because I'm in a miserable mood. My whole life is miserable. So if you can bring them to that point, now it sparks their emotion, and either unconsciously or consciously, they begin to associate you and your company and your solution with what's going to fix the problem.
Right. Because they have latent pain, but people with latent pain don't want to feel latent pain.
Yeah.
Especially guys. We go to the doctor when something's missing, right? We don't wait until, I got this little thing I can't explain. We take some aspirin and we think about it later.
Yeah.
Our clients are the same way, because they usually come to us when they have active pain, and then we don't have time because it's a fire drill.
Right. So many of the guys that have been working with us, they got to that. Again, I'll use the word rational pain. I don't really know if that's the right word or not, and they'd stop there and they'd be like, okay, I get it. And here's how we're going to solve all those issues. And then they'd go down and they'd pitch whatever solution it is that we're trying to solve. And the guy would go away, wouldn't call back. Why is he not calling back? He's got the pain. He's got this. He's got that. Well, you didn't really dig in far enough, and he's not associating you with the solution. Had you gotten to that, like you're talking about, more latent pain, then he's going to be far more inclined to view you as part of the solution and keep in touch with you.
Right, because you're kind of co-creating that solution.
That's right.
Because
in fact, I said in my notes, it's all that creation.
Yeah.
It was the analogy with, I think you used that analogy where somebody had the tree fall on their house.
Yes.
All the other neighbors decided to get the tree guy in to take all their trees down.
5 roads were full of tree trucks.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen a tree truck in the neighborhood.
Yeah. And so that's the same sort of thing that I'm preaching to my guys. That I learned way too late in my career, but thankfully I did. And then urging them not to stop at that too, because the other thing that you talk about all the time that we oftentimes forget, we get them so hopped up and they're in this emotional, pain state. We're at critical mass. We're really ready to go. And we forget or we ignore that we don't really know if they know how to buy it. And that's another key thing that you talk about a lot that I am an advocate for. And so oftentimes we find that our prospect doesn't have any idea how to get the deal done or where he's going to go next. And oftentimes they'll outline a very logical plan. We do this, we do this, we do this, we do this, but they don't know all the steps in between. And so if we're not asking them, okay, well, tell me about, last time you did this, how did and you find out, okay, well, I never did it with this company before. That was what I did at my last company. Or find out all kinds of stuff that you're going to run into that are just going to derail you, and you're not going to get the sale, but also your client is not going to get what he wants. And so if we can convince them that we're the guy that's going to lead them or help lead them through all these minds, then we have the ability to make them look good in front of their boss, make them look good in front of their team. So instead of going through the process 4 times, striking out 3 times, and you finally get lucky the 4th, you're going to get it right in the first time.
Right, because that's where deals die.
Mm-hmm.
People think it's all about money.
No.
Before you ever call a company, you can get a sense of how much money they have.
Mm-hmm.
Number of people, revenue, growing, shrinking. They've got money.
Right.
But they've got millions of priorities, and buying something new isn't one of them.
No.
It's doing their job.
Right. And the easier we make it on them, the better it is. If we don't make it easy, then it's just going to go south. We're not going to get it. People will do what's easiest. Even if misery is easy, they'll do misery over work and happiness a lot of times. And that was something that some of my guys have a hard time grasping. That, oh my God, he's got this big problem, and if he doesn't get it done, and we got him to emotional pain. Okay, well, that can all be true, but if he doesn't know and isn't going to play ball with you in terms of how it's going to get done, then it's going to be an issue. Even if he's done this a million times before, he hasn't done it with you before. He doesn't know what landmines he may be facing currently. He may have done it a year ago, and things change in business monthly. So if he hasn't done it lately, maybe he might want to check out to see if everything he holds near and dear is still true.
Right. Yeah, because if there's a new person in procurement or somebody new in finance, they have all kinds of things wrong they can find with what you want to do. Right, why not to do
it? Exactly. So we coach our guys to say, when your prospect says, hey, I'm going to do this, we advise you against doing that. If you really want to get this done, let's wait on that. We advise against that. This might be a better option for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we have revenue prevention. They have expense prevention.
Yeah.
And if you know what they need to see, how they need to see it, you just, you just greased it. You just showed them exactly how to do it.
Mm-hmm. And if you're unaware of how to get it all done, then that's okay. It's not like we're that rigid. We're like, okay, you have to have all these things, but we want to know going in where are our risks together. And when we have those conversations about, okay, how did it go last time, and you think you can get this done in a week and a half. Well, what makes you think that? Let's walk through the last time that happened. And if that's never happened, then okay, let's identify where the roadblocks were last time, because that might be where they are. And if we don't know where are, then we go into it together, knowing that there's a little bit of an unknown, and we'll work through it together. And you're not going to go doing crazy stuff without consulting with us first. And they really appreciate that, because when the deal is done and everybody's happy again, their team is now doing work that they were hired for, not doing this other guy's job, and the work quality is better. They're meeting deadlines. Everybody's happy. The boss is happy. Those things, even though ultimately they benefit us selfishly, ultimately they lead to a happier customer. Yeah. It's hard to, sometimes it's hard to get to that point with a client, because they all feel like they want to keep this control. Like, okay, I can't let this guy know. Like, you walk on a used car lot or something like that, and you're like, okay, I'm not even going to tell him, what kind of car I'm driving, anything. You don't want to give him any kind of information, because you're fearful of of losing that control.
Yeah.
And so, getting them to kind of open up on that control and convincing them that the more they share with us, the more control they keep. That's key. And that's been something that my guys have done real well.
And in your space, how do you prevent falling into the commodity trap?
It's not easy. We are viewed in many ways as a commodity.
Yeah.
And so the only differentiator, there's two main differentiators with us. And it's me or the sales guy. Does this guy have his act together? Is he going to be respected in his organization? So the way this works is we don't really have the person sitting on a shelf. We go find them and then bring them to the client. So it's with commodities, we struggling to explain it. It's really incumbent upon the salesperson to work the deal on both sides of the equation. So when I leave the table with you, I'm going to fight with my company to provide you with the best service possible. Okay. So it's really the service. It's not the person that we're selling. It's the service that it goes behind that.
Yes.
If we can, help them appreciate how that service and all those things in the service differentiate from somebody else, because there are different ways to do this. But knowing that I'm the guy that's going to make it happen for you and you have my personal commitment, that's really the number one differentiator to keep us out of that commodity world. The second one is we have a company philosophy that is flexible. And that would be, okay, if we have to compromise some terms or whatever to get the deal done, if it makes sense for you, then we have the ability to compromise that where it makes sense. And that not all companies have that. We're a private company, so we don't have the pressures of the board to keep, heavy profit margins and things like that. So we can kind of tinker a little bit with margins and things like that. We typically don't have to because they soon see that our service is worth paying full price for. So we don't have that very often. But yeah, that's one of the things that we fight is that commodity thing.
Right. Because we go from, getting into that pain, scoping a solution, but somebody comes along and says, well, we've already under contract with Joe over here. Right. He did our website. I think he can do this.
Right.
and we all face it
from time to time. Yeah.
And it's the nature of the game is that they want to commoditize you, yet we're people, which are the opposite of a commodity.
Right. And there's people in the service, but then there's people that are actually the product too. We're not selling refrigerators. We're not just shipping, there. This person walks and talks and has opinions and can do stupid things or not stupid things. And so all of that service that goes into ensuring that it's the right person is really the differentiator that we work on. Whereas, again, I think there's a perception that we're just pulling these people off the shelf, and it's not. It's a lot of, you're describing a person that has certain skills, but you're also describing a person that has to fit your environment. And, we compete not only against other staffing firms, but we compete against internal recruiting.
Overseas.
Offshore.
Upwork.
And even like things like Indeed and Monster.
Yeah.
With like a ZipRecruiter who, and then, okay, we have this algorithm that's going to, put the right skills on your doorstep. And well, okay, that's all well and good, but you don't know if the guy's a jerk.
Because he made up all the skills.
Right. And he had somebody else take his test and all that sort of stuff. And so that's where we're the watch guard behind that. And some staffing companies are more diligent about that than others. And that's what we hang our hat on. We're a smaller company, so we can't afford to let opportunity pass. And so when we find that when we go through all of these things this way, some opportunities that we never would have chased if we hadn't gone down that road now become good-looking opportunities to us.
Yeah.
Then there are others that looked like they were gold mines. I'm like, whoa, we got to, this is not going to work for us. But if you don't do that, you end up really wasting time and resources. And, there are some customers that could be great customers that you never get. And then other customers that you continue to beat your head against, and you say to yourself, finally, this isn't really working. And that's hard as a sales leader when you're telling a sales, look, these guys just aren't good for you, and they look at all the work that they've put in, and they're so close, and they don't realize that they were never close to begin with.
Well, that's certainly a challenge for all of us, because like if somebody reaches out to us, it's automatically qualified. It's like, no, it's just easy.
Right, it fell in your lap, but we don't get
You don't get much of that. A lot of inbound.
No, we don't really get much of that. We're definitely an outbound sort of company.
And what motivated you to become the player coach?
Well, it's something I like to do. I really like to do that coaching part. I like the fact that I was able to have an impact on these guys that might otherwise kind of struggle, and it's something that I had never gotten myself.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things like, man, there's really something that's missing in this whole industry. We just kind of, I don't know if other sales is like this, but it's kind of like you're hired. And it's like, okay, there's the phone and there's the bathroom, get going and good luck. And that I wasn't really too keen on that. That's kind of how I grew up in it. But a lot of good people, went by the wayside. And as I do more coaching, I kind of don't have to, do a lot of the player stuff that isn't as appetizing. Like my guys are doing the majority of our cold calls and all sorts of stuff like that, which is a necessary but kind of, not the best part of our job. And so I get to do more of what I like and less of what I prefer not to do. And so that's how I wanted to. And then the company that I'm working for, MRCC Solutions, they gave me the opportunity to do it. And we've got a real good relationship with everybody on board here, and we're all kind of on the same page, which is really a great to be as a leader in the company. When everybody's on the same page, it's a joy to be in a company like that.
And what are those skills? Let's say you were looking to hire another rep. What would you be looking for?
So I recently hired a new guy, and what I look for is first off, personality. You can't teach personality, so we absolutely have to have folks that can carry on a conversation with people naturally. They're not having difficulty making chit chat. Now, yeah. So that's number one. Number two is somebody that has, at one point in their life, been able to deal in sort of a solo role. Like there's a lot of stuff going on up here that you have to fight through. You go through a bad week, whatever your metrics are, whether you go through a bad week, bad 2 weeks, and still having the discipline to keep going, or maybe the creativity to kind of think of other things, and also the smarts to be able to say, hey, look, maybe I'm attacking this the wrong way. So those are sort of things that I look to hire, and somebody who's going to do. I've worked with a lot of people who think, but have a hard time doing. I get it in the classroom, but when I'm faced with a situation, I have a hard time pulling the trigger. And people who overanalyze or overthink, those folks tend not to do well in sales, or at least from my experience. The folks that don't think too much and just kind of do, those are the folks that I like. So we've had some good success hiring golfers.
Really?
Which is odd, but it makes sense because, golf
strategy.
And it's a solo game. We haven't, team players are fine. Competitive guys are fine, but team players tend to be like,
team.
We're all in this together and we're all relying on each other. And what happens when you have to rely on yourself? And that's a lot of times what sales is. Like you say, it's a performance thing. And you have to be able to perform as an individual and not necessarily have the teammates lift you up. There is a little bit of that, but when you're one-on-one, you've got to be able to perform one-on-one. And again, the golfers have been really good at that. They tend to have that type of personality where they have the gift of gab, they have a good personality, they're able to adapt to different people, and they tend to really kind of fit what we do here.
Well, that personality is required because it takes a conversation to get to that pain.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get it on the first phone call.
No, not at all.
You got to dig and build rapport and trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, build curiosity right from the start.
Yeah. And
And
all those
those
people want
folks,
to talk about their problems.
that's right.
They all have problems.
Yeah.
That's what's great about IT.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's always changing. It's always growing. What is today is going to change tomorrow. When I first started doing this, there was no such thing as really the internet. Like we all shared
Mm.
one email address. If we wanted to get online, we had to like dial a phone to do it. So not to date myself, I guess, but it was like, so technology's changed our world a lot. Um, and in particular, in the staffing world has changed quite a bit too. So, and as technology evolves, it really, we kind of evolve with it. Um, but many of the concepts that we're talking about, I think will continue to last no matter, what
Right.
technology or whatever.
Well, that's it. Everybody keeps focusing on the technology changing, but the people haven't kept up with how they deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of those things about your job and what happens if this doesn't get resolved. Those consequences are still going to remain the same.
And how or what mistakes do people make in your space?
They're not honest with themselves.
Yeah.
They get to a point where they have such great rapport with their prospect, and they feel so much pain. This guy is falling over himself. He's just ready to sign. All I got to do is give him a pen, and they fool themselves and they don't look at how could this deal go south, and they tend to not be honest with how this thing could fail because they're afraid that if there's a path of failure, that they're the ones that are creating that. If they recognize it, then they must not have done their job. And it's one of those things like, look, there's always a path of failure, and we have to identify whether we can avoid that or not. There's going to be some risks and some paths that we may not be able to avoid, but let's talk about whether we can avoid them or not. And if you're not being honest with yourself about what those risks are, then you automatically can't do anything about preventing them. And you really, again, you kind of get at the end and this sure thing lost. And I can't believe it. We all kind of sit around a table and like, what happened? And like then that's when the sales manager comes in and says, well, you didn't keep them to their commitments well enough, or some sort of other crazy thing that they heard on the internet someday, like
Some guy walking around with a
it's
camera.
like, well, guys, we probably didn't identify what the point of failure was, and we didn't do anything to try to mitigate. And there's a bunch of them. No matter how sure your deal is, there's millions of points of failure that are out there. And again, we can't control all of them.
Right.
But control the ones that we can, so that if we're at 70%, let's make it 90. Let's not just be at 70% and then hope that the 30% doesn't undo us, because that's ultimate. That a lot of guys do that, and that's a hard conversation to have with people, to say, look, man, you're not being honest with yourself. This deal that you think is ready to, revolutionize sales, it ain't happening. And I'll tell you right now, it ain't happening.
Well, I mean, certainly in your space, the biggest competitor is probably doing nothing or putting it off. I got to believe.
I'm sorry. Say it again.
I got to believe in your space, the biggest competition is them just not doing it now and delaying it.
Oh, yes. Yep. The delays, there's two things. There's the delays, putting it off, because it's become very commonplace for the symptoms that these guys feel. It's almost when I didn't want to get too far into staffing, but so many of the problems that we have, or a manager will have, is that they'll have fake candidates show up. They'll have people no show for the first day. they'll go through millions of interviews to hire one guy, and then he's gone after a week. Those sort of things. And they accept those issues as just par for the course. Well, nothing we can do about it. That happens no matter what. And they don't realize that, you know what, there is plenty you can do about it. Your current solution, or the people that are currently responsible for ensuring that doesn't happen don't care, because you haven't made them care. But if you were working with an organization that did care, you'd find out that all those things that you accept as just par for the course are not. And so when your question was about delaying, they'll go ahead and delay and delay and delay, and they'll say they'll take forever until it gets to an absolute critical time when the boss is ready to say, look, if you don't hire somebody now, you're fired. And then, okay, all right, I get it. And now they've reached that emotional point, whereas we could have brought them to that emotional point much longer, much further ago, and had their problem solved a long time ago. And instead of looking like a dummy in front of their boss, they're looking like a hero. Like, here's this guy that's taken 3 months to hire a guy. I got another guy over here who does it in a week. Well, who am I going to promote? Well, it's going to be this guy over here.
He knows what he's doing.
A lot of times they don't get that concept. They just kind of throw up their hands and say, well, what we can do about it. And so they're fine on, well, if this opportunity doesn't happen, then no big deal. That's the way it goes anyway. We'll just wait till the deal happens all on its own. It's our job to make sure that the job
happens. Cool. Hey, Sean, I appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Well, mrccsolutions.com. And they can get me on LinkedIn. And my email address is ssullivan@mrccsolutions.com.